"You shouldn't have shown up. No one wants you here." My daughter's fiancé shouted at me in the middle of their wedding ceremony beneath the blazing Arizona desert sun. Around 200 followers of his cult turned their cold, judging eyes toward me, but I simply smiled. What Marcus Kane didn't realize was that I had spent months uncovering who he truly was beneath that polished spiritual exterior. What I learned would chill any parent to the bone. As my hand slipped into the pocket of my jacket, I knew his flawless mask was about to crack right in front of everyone. As a father who fought for his daughter, I want to hear from you. Comment below which city you're watching from. Your support means everything to me. 18 months ago, I thought the worst thing that could happen to my daughter was losing her mother. I was wrong. Emma had always been my pride and joy. Straight A's through high school, full scholarship to Stanford Medical School. The kind of daughter who called home every Sunday. After her mother died from cancer 2 years earlier, Emma threw herself into her studies even harder. "I'm going to save lives, Dad," she'd tell me during our weekly calls. That's why when she mentioned a spiritual wellness retreat on campus, I didn't worry. College kids were always trying new things to deal with stress. Emma was pulling 18-hour days between classes and clinical rotations. If some meditation group could help her find balance, I was all for it. "There's this amazing speaker coming to Stanford," Emma told me during one of our Sunday calls, her voice carrying excitement I hadn't heard since before her mother's diagnosis. "He's supposed to be this incredible spiritual healer." I should have paid more attention to those words, spiritual healer. Marcus Kane took the stage at Memorial Auditorium like he owned it. Emma described him as magnetic. Mid-30s, silver hair, piercing blue eyes that seemed to look right into your soul. He wore simple clothes, spoke calmly, and made everyone feel like he was speaking directly to them. "Pain is not your enemy," he told the 200 students that night. "Pain is your teacher, your guide to a higher understanding." Emma hung on every word. But Marcus wasn't just giving a talk. He was studying that room, cataloging vulnerabilities, identifying targets. My brilliant, grieving daughter lit up like a beacon. After his presentation, Marcus offered individual healing consultations. Private 15-minute sessions for personalized spiritual guidance. Emma was one of the first to sign up. "He knew things about me, Dad," she told me breathlessly the next week. "Things I'd never told anyone. He could see the pain I was carrying about Mom, the guilt I felt for not being able to save her. He understood me like no one else ever has." That should have been my first red flag. A stranger claiming to see intimate details about my daughter's grief. But Emma sounded happier than she had in months. Marcus suggested Emma attend his weekly healing circles, small group sessions at a house near campus. Within a month, she was attending 3 times a week. Her grades started slipping. She missed family dinners, forgot phone calls, seemed distant and distracted. "I'm discovering who I really am underneath all the expectations," she'd say when I expressed concern. "Marcus is helping me understand that maybe medicine isn't my true calling. More meaningful than saving lives, that wasn't the Emma I'd raised." The real change came during Thanksgiving. Emma had always loved our traditions. The Macy's parade, her mother's stuffing recipe, sharing what we were grateful for. This time she barely participated. She picked at her food, checked her phone, constantly seemed anxious to leave. "Marcus says clinging to past traditions keeps us trapped in old thinking patterns," she explained. "He's teaching me to live in the present moment, to let go of attachments that no longer serve my spiritual growth." That night, as I cleaned dishes alone, Emma approached me with an expression I'd never seen, a mixture of pity and condescension that made my blood run cold. "Dad, I need to tell you something important," she said in an eerily calm tone that didn't sound like her. "I found my spiritual guide. Marcus isn't just a teacher. He's helping me understand my true purpose. I think you'd really benefit from meeting him." I watched my brilliant daughter become someone I didn't recognize. 3 months after that Thanksgiving conversation, Emma dropped a bombshell that shattered everything I thought I knew about my daughter. "Dad, I'm taking a leave of absence from medical school," she announced during what would become our last normal phone call. "I've realized that traditional Western medicine only treats symptoms, not the root spiritual causes of illness." I nearly dropped the phone. "Emma, sweetheart, you're in your 3rd year. You've worked so hard." "Don't bring up the past," she cut me off. "Marcus has helped me understand that clinging to old dreams prevents spiritual growth. I'm meant for something higher." The coldness in her voice made my stomach turn. This wasn't the daughter who had promised to become a doctor to honor her mother's memory. Over the next few weeks, Emma's transformation accelerated. She stopped returning calls. When I reached her roommate, Jessica, I learned Emma had been spending entire nights away from her dorm. "She's different, Mr. Can," Jessica said worriedly. "She gave away all her textbooks last week, said they were toxic energy holding her back." I drove to Stanford that weekend, hands gripping the steering wheel. Emma's dorm room was nearly empty. Gone were the medical journals, anatomy posters, photos of her mother. In their place were crystals, burning sage, and books about spiritual awakening. Emma wasn't there. According to Jessica, she'd moved to her spiritual family near Sedona, Arizona. My daughter had joined Marcus Kane's compound. When Emma finally called 2 weeks later, I barely recognized her voice. The warmth, intelligence, and spark that had defined her since childhood seemed drained away, replaced by robotic serenity. "I wanted to let you know I'm exactly where I need to be," she said. "Marcus has shown me that real family isn't defined by blood, but by spiritual connection. Emma, please just come home for a visit," I begged. "We can talk about this. You don't understand, Dad. You're trapped in material illusion. Marcus says people like you become obstacles to growth. He's taught me to recognize toxic relationships and release them with love." Toxic relationships. She was talking about me like I was some disease. "I've found my true purpose," Emma continued in that rehearsed tone I'd grown to dread. "I'm helping Marcus guide lost souls toward enlightenment. We're building something pure here. I wish you could see it, but I understand if you're not ready for spiritual evolution." The condescension broke my heart. This was my little girl who used to call me her hero. "Emma, I love you," I said, voice cracking. "No matter what, I will always love you. What you call love is really just attachment and control," she replied. "Marcus is teaching me the difference between authentic love and emotional manipulation." She hung up. That was 15 months ago. I hadn't spoken to my daughter since. For weeks I walked around like a ghost. Emma's childhood bedroom remained untouched. Trophies, Stanford, acceptance letter, photos with her mother. I'd sit there trying to understand how I'd failed to protect her from this predator. That night, staring at Emma's empty room, I made a decision that would change everything. The fluorescent lights in the Salt Lake City Police Department felt harsh as I sat across from Detective Lisa Rodriguez. I'd barely slept in weeks trying to figure out how to save my daughter from Marcus Kane's grip. "Mr. Khan, I understand you're concerned?" Detective Rodriguez said, her voice professional but kind. She was younger than I'd expected, with sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen her share of tragedies. "But adults have the right to make their own choices." "This isn't about choices," I said, leaning forward. "My daughter was a third-year medical student at Stanford. Now she's living in some compound giving all her money to a man calling himself a spiritual guru. That's manipulation, not choice." Rodriguez's expression shifted. She pulled out a notepad. "Tell me about this guru." "Marcus Kane runs a spiritual community near Sedona. My daughter met him at a campus retreat 18 months ago." I watched her face carefully. When I mentioned Marcus Kane, something flickered in her eyes. Not quite recognition, but interest. "Has your daughter mentioned giving money to this Marcus Kane?" she asked. "She had a trust fund from her mother, about $200,000 for medical school." Rodriguez wrote notes carefully. "Mr. Kane, I'm going to be honest with you. What you're describing sounds concerning, but we need to investigate before we can take any action. Give me a few days to look into this Marcus Kane and his operation." "A few days, Detective. My daughter could be in danger right now. I understand your urgency, but rushing in without information could make things worse. If this man is what you think he is, we need to be smart about how we approach this." She handed me her business card. "I'll call you by Friday. In the meantime, try not to contact your daughter directly. If Kane is running some kind of scam, we don't want to alert him that we're investigating." Those 3 days felt like the longest of my life. I paced my house, stared at Emma's childhood photos, and jumped every time the phone rang. When Rodriguez finally called, her voice was grim. "Mr. Ken, I need you to come in again. We found some things about Marcus Kane that you need to see." An hour later, I was back in that fluorescent-lit office, but this time Rodriguez had files spread across her desk and a look on her face that made my stomach drop. "I'm going to show you some photographs," she said without preamble. "Tell me if your daughter has mentioned these women." She slid 2 photos across the desk. Both showed young women around Emma's age, attractive, intelligent-looking. "This is Amanda Thompson," Rodriguez said. 26 psychology graduate student in Denver. Inherited $1.8 million in 2019. By 2021, every penny was donated to Marcus Kane's community. She died of a drug overdose 6 months later. My hands clenched, and the other woman, Rebecca Johnson, Phoenix, met Marcus at a grief retreat after losing her parents. Inherited $2.2 million from insurance. Her body was found at the bottom of a canyon near Sedona 8 months ago. The room spun. You think he killed them. I think Marcus Kane finds wealthy, vulnerable women and takes everything. Rodriguez pulled out a police report with a mugshot. Marcus Kane's real name is David Kowalski. Convicted sex offender with a 15-year criminal record. Rage built in my chest. This predator had my daughter. We need someone on the inside, Rodriguez continued. Detective Tom Bradley from Organized Crime. He's done cult infiltration before. She organized the files methodically. We're going to get your daughter back, Mr. Kahn, and we're going to make sure David Kowalski never hurts another family. The detective's next words made my blood run cold. 2 weeks later, Detective Tom Bradley walked through the gates of Marcus Kane's compound, looking like any other lost soul seeking spiritual guidance. Dressed in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, with 3 days of stubble and carefully practiced desperation in his eyes, he was the perfect broken man in need of healing. I watched from a surveillance van parked 2 miles away, listening through Bradley's hidden microphone as he approached the main building. Somewhere in that compound was my daughter, and for the first time in over a year, I might actually get to see her. Welcome, brother. A young man with glazed eyes greeted Bradley. I'm Michael. Marcus says the universe brings us exactly who we need. What's your story? Bradley had rehearsed this moment for weeks. Lost my wife in a car accident 6 months ago, he said, voice cracking with practiced emotion. Been drinking myself to death since. Heard Marcus might help me find peace. You've come to the right place, Michael said. Marcus has helped all of us find our way out of darkness. The compound was larger than expected. Maybe 40 buildings across 200 acres housing over 100 people. Most were young women with scattered men serving as guards and recruiters. Bradley's first ceremony took place that evening in the Sacred Circle, a large circular building at the compound's center. About 60 people sat cross-legged, while Marcus Kane stood in the middle wearing flowing white robes. Tonight we release toxic attachments, binding us to our false selves, Marcus announced in that hypnotic voice Emma had described. The sacred medicine will show us truth. Through Bradley's wire, I heard small cups being passed around. Later analysis would show the liquid contained psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, and other psychoactive compounds, enough to put someone in a highly suggestible state for hours. I saw your daughter, Bradley whispered during a bathroom break. 3rd row from the front, sitting right next to Kane. She looks thin, pale, but she was staring at him like he was some kind of god. My heart broke hearing those words. Over the following weeks, Bradley documented everything. Financial meetings where members signed over bank accounts and inheritance checks to the community fund. Private sessions where Kane took young women into his quarters for individual spiritual healing. Sessions lasting hours, leaving them dazed and ashamed. Most damning were recordings of Kane's inner circle meetings where he dropped his enlightened act. Rebecca was becoming a problem, Kane said during one late-night meeting. Started asking questions about her money. Had to arrange that hiking accident. Bradley's blood ran cold, hearing Kane casually discuss murder. In the surveillance van, Rodriguez and I exchanged horrified glances. The Can girl is almost ready for the next phase, Kane continued. Got access to her trust fund last month. 200 grand, but her father's been sniffing around. Might need to deal with that problem soon. My stomach turned. Kane was planning to marry my daughter. When's the ceremony up? A follower asked. 3 months. Desert wedding, very spiritual. By then, Emma will be completely broken in. She'll sign over whatever inheritance she's got coming from Daddy, and then... Kane shrugged. Accidents happen, especially to new wives who can't handle spiritual intensity. Through his wire, I heard Bradley's breathing quicken. Kane was planning to kill Emma after their wedding, just like Rebecca and Amanda. We need to move fast, Rodriguez whispered. He's planning something big, and your daughter is right in the middle of it. What they discovered inside would shock even experienced officers. The small silver necklace felt heavier than it should have in my palm. Detective Rodriguez had just handed it to me across her desk, and I was staring at what looked like ordinary jewelry, the kind Emma used to wear. The camera is embedded in the pendant, Rodriguez explained, pointing to a tiny heart-shaped charm. But Atticus, you get one shot at this. If Kane discovers it, we lose our only inside access. My hands trembled as I fastened the delicate chain. How do I get close enough to Emma? We've arranged a supervised visit. Bradley's been telling Kane that Emma's asking about her father, having doubts about cutting family ties. Rodriguez's expression was grim. Kane thinks he can use your visit as manipulation. Show Emma how spiritually inferior you are. The drive to Sedona felt endless. I hadn't seen my daughter in 15 months, and my heart hammered as the compound gates appeared. 2 guards searched me thoroughly before escorting me to a small meeting room. When Emma walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the vibrant young woman who'd left for Stanford. This Emma was gaunt cheekbones, sharp beneath pale skin. Her once bright eyes seemed dull, unfocused. She wore a simple white dress that hung loose on her thin frame. "Hello, Atticus," she said in a flat, emotionless voice like she was reading from a script. "Emma, sweetheart." I stood up, moving toward her, but she stepped back. "Marcus thought it would be good for my spiritual development to see you one more time," she continued robotically, "to help me understand how far I've evolved beyond old attachments." The words cut deep, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I brought you something. It was your mother's necklace." For just a moment, Emma's mask slipped. Her eyes focused on the silver chain, and I saw a flicker of the daughter I remembered. "Mom's necklace," she whispered. "She wore it every day until she got too sick. Made me promise to give it to you when you were ready." Emma's hand reached out almost involuntarily, then stopped. "Marcus says material possessions bind us to lower consciousness. It's not about possession, it's about love, about remembering who you were." She took the necklace, fingers tracing the heart pendant. "I suppose I could keep it as a reminder of what I've transcended," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. As she fastened it around her neck, I felt hope and terror. The camera was now in position. "Emma, I need you to know that no matter what happens, I love you. I will always love you." For a brief moment, her composure cracked. "Daddy," she whispered, 7 years old again. Then the door opened and Marcus Kane walked in. He was exactly as Emma had described. Tall, silver-haired, piercing blue eyes. But there was something predatory that made my skin crawl. "Atticus Kane," he said, extending his hand with practiced warmth. "I've heard so much about you." I shook his hand, fighting every instinct to punch him. "I just want what's best for my daughter." Unfortunately, what parents think is best is often just fear and control. Marcus smiled coldly, placing his hand possessively on Emma's shoulder. I watched her entire demeanor change. The brief spark of recognition vanished, replaced by glazed devotion. The visit lasted another painful hour, with Marcus undermining everything I said while Emma nodded like a programmed robot. But the necklace stayed around her neck, recording everything. 3 days later, Rodriguez called with devastating news. "We got it all, Atticus," she said. "Kane's planning to disappear right after the wedding. Private jet to South America. New identities prepared. And Emma won't be making that trip with him." As I walked out of that compound, I knew there was no turning back. The desert sun was already blazing at 7 in the morning as I drove through the compound gates for what I knew would be the final time. Today was Emma's wedding day, and today Marcus Kane's reign of terror would end. Detective Rodriguez's voice crackled through my hidden earpiece. "All units are in position, Atticus. Remember, stay calm no matter what he says to you. We need him confident and off guard when the video starts." The compound had been transformed overnight. White fabric draped between the buildings, creating an ethereal pathway leading to a large circular stage built in the center courtyard. Desert flowers adorned every surface, and hundreds of white chairs arranged in perfect rows faced what looked like an altar made of stacked stones. It was beautiful, and it made me sick. I parked near the back, watching as guests began arriving. Most were compound members I didn't recognize, but I spotted a few faces from Emma's old life. Former classmates who'd apparently been drawn into Kane's web. Their parents looking uncomfortable and out of place among the flowing robes and crystal jewelry. "Atticus Kane." The voice behind me was cold, unwelcoming. I turned to see Michael, the same glassy-eyed young man who'd greeted Detective Bradley weeks ago. "Marcus wasn't sure you'd actually come." "I wouldn't miss my daughter's wedding," I replied evenly. Michael's smile was anything but friendly. "Your seat is in the back row. Marcus felt it would be appropriate given your spiritual development level." The back row, of course. Even at his own daughter's wedding, Kane was making sure I knew my place in his twisted hierarchy. As the ceremony hour approached, more guests filled the chairs. I counted at least 200 people, all dressed in white, as Kane had apparently requested. The morning heat was already becoming oppressive, but no one seemed to notice. They all had that same serene, vacant expression I'd seen on Emma's face. At exactly 10 o'clock, music began playing, some kind of New Age instrumental that echoed across the desert. The wedding party emerged from the main building, walking slowly down the white-draped pathway. Marcus came first, dressed in flowing white robes that made him look like some kind of prophet. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and that predatory smile was fixed firmly in place. Behind him walked his inner circle, the men and women who helped him maintain control over this place. Then came Emma. My breath caught in my throat. She looked like a ghost in her white dress, the fabric seeming to float around her thin frame. The necklace I'd given her, the one with the hidden camera, glinted silver against her pale skin. Her face was completely blank, emotionless, as if she was sleepwalking through her own wedding. This wasn't my daughter walking down that aisle. This was what Cain had turned her into. A hollow shell of the brilliant young woman who'd once dreamed of saving lives. The ceremony itself was a bizarre mixture of pseudo-spiritual nonsense and theatrical manipulation. Cain spoke about sacred unions and transcending earthly attachments, while Emma stood beside him like a mannequin. When the time came for vows, she recited words that sounded rehearsed, empty of any real emotion. "I surrender my individual will to our collective consciousness," she said in that flat, robotic voice. "I offer my complete trust and devotion to my spiritual guide and eternal partner." It wasn't a wedding. It was a public brainwashing ceremony. Then Cain turned his attention to the audience, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me in the back row. "Before we complete this sacred ceremony," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "I want to address the negative energy that has followed Emma on her spiritual journey." My stomach tightened. This was it. Cain gestured toward me with theatrical flourish. "Emma's biological father has chosen to attend today despite our repeated requests that he respect our community's boundaries." 200 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. I felt the weight of their judgment, their collective disapproval washing over me like a wave. "You shouldn't have come. Nobody wants you here." Cain's voice rose, filled with righteous indignation. "This is a sacred space, a celebration of spiritual evolution, and your presence here is nothing but a desperate attempt to drag Emma back into the darkness of material attachment." The crowd murmured agreement. Some were nodding, others looked at me with open hostility. Cain had turned my daughter's wedding into a public trial, with me as the accused. But Marcus had no idea what was about to happen next. I stood up slowly from my back row seat, every eye in the courtyard still fixed on me after Marcus's vicious public attack. The desert heat seemed to intensify as silence stretched across the crowd. 200 people waiting to see how the spiritually inferior father would respond to their guru's condemnation. Instead of the shame or anger Marcus expected, I simply reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small remote control. "You're absolutely right, Marcus," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "I shouldn't have come, but I'm so glad I did." I pressed the button. Instantly, the large screens that had been displaying serene nature imagery throughout the ceremony flickered and changed. The first image that appeared was a police booking photo. A younger Marcus Cain, but those same predatory blue eyes were unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the stunned crowd, "I'd like you to meet David Kowalski, convicted sex offender and wanted fugitive." The courtyard erupted in confused murmurs, but Marcus's face had gone completely white. "Turn that off," he screamed, lunging toward the nearest screen control panel. "This is sabotage!" But the evidence kept rolling. Court documents appeared on screen detailing David Kowalski's conviction for statutory rape in Ohio. Then came the photographs. Amanda Thompson and Rebecca Johnson, the two young women who died after giving Marcus their inheritance money. Amanda Thompson, age 26. I continued my voice steady despite the chaos. Gave Marcus $1.8 million before dying of a suspicious overdose. Rebecca Johnson, age 24, donated $2.2 million before falling to her death in what police believe was murder. Emma stood frozen at the altar, her face a mask of confusion and growing horror. The blank, robotic expression she'd worn throughout the ceremony was cracking, replaced by genuine emotion I hadn't seen in over a year. "This is lies," Marcus shouted, but his voice had lost that hypnotic quality. Now he just sounded desperate, panicked. Then came the most damning evidence of all. The screen showed footage from Detective Bradley's hidden camera. Marcus in a late-night meeting with his 3 closest lieutenants, the inner circle who helped him maintain control over the compound. Rebecca was becoming a problem. Marcus's own voice echoed across the courtyard through the speakers, started asking questions about her money, had to arrange that hiking accident. Several guests gasped audibly. Some were already backing away from the altar where their spiritual leader was being exposed as a murderer. But Marcus wasn't finished on the recording. His voice continued with chilling casualness. The can girl is almost ready for the next phase. Got access to her trust fund last month. 200 grand. But her father's been sniffing around. Might need to deal with that problem soon. One of his lieutenants on the video asked, "When's the ceremony?" 3 months. Dessert wedding. Very spiritual. Very romantic. By then, Emma will be completely broken in. She'll sign over whatever inheritance she's got coming from Daddy, and then... Marcus shrugged on screen. Accidents happen, especially to new wives who can't handle spiritual intensity. Emma's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees on the altar, staring at the screens in absolute shock, as her spiritual guide's true nature was laid bare. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No, this can't be real. Marcus, tell them this isn't real." But Marcus was no longer focused on maintaining his facade. Police officers were emerging from behind buildings surrounding the courtyard with weapons drawn. Detective Rodriguez's voice boomed through a megaphone. "David Kowalski, you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and murder." Marcus made one last desperate attempt at control. "This is persecution," he screamed at his followers. "They're trying to destroy our community." But the spell was broken. The evidence was too overwhelming. Compound members were fleeing in all directions, some crying, others shouting in confusion and betrayal. 2 officers tackled Marcus as he tried to run. He went down hard, his white robes tearing in the dirt as they cuffed his hands behind his back. "Emma Can is my wife," he screamed as they dragged him away. "Actually, Pa," Detective Rodriguez said, appearing beside the altar, "the ceremony was never legally binding. David Kowalski isn't licensed to perform marriages anywhere." Emma was sobbing now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. The necklace I'd given her, containing the camera that had captured final evidence, caught the sunlight as her shoulders trembled. Slowly, she lifted her head and looked directly at me across the chaotic courtyard. For the first time in 18 months, I saw my daughter's real eyes looking back at me. 6 months after that desert wedding that never was, I sat in a quiet therapy center in Salt Lake City, watching my daughter slowly find her way back to herself. The road to recovery had been harder than either of us imagined, but Emma was fighting for her life in ways that made me prouder than any medical achievement ever could. "The hardest part," Emma told Dr. Lisa Martinez, her therapist, "is accepting how completely I lost myself. I gave him everything. My education, my money, my identity, even my ability to think clearly." She looked different now. The gaunt, hollow-eyed woman from the wedding had been replaced by someone still fragile, but undeniably alive. Her hair had grown out, no longer pulled back, in that severe style Kane preferred. She wore simple jeans and a Stanford sweatshirt I'd bought her, a small gesture toward reclaiming stolen dreams. The detox had been brutal. Marcus had been feeding his followers psychoactive drugs disguised as sacred medicine, and Emma's body had been dependent for over a year. For weeks she suffered nightmares, anxiety attacks, episodes where she couldn't distinguish reality from manufactured spiritual experiences. But gradually her real personality emerged from behind the programming. "I keep remembering moments where I knew something was wrong," Emma said during family therapy. "But Marcus taught me that doubt was spiritual weakness. Tell me about one I encouraged. When he made me sign over Mom's trust fund. Deep down I knew Mom would have hated what I was doing with her money, but he convinced me that material attachments prevented spiritual evolution." She looked at me directly. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I gave away everything you and Mom worked for. Sweetheart money can be replaced," I said, taking her hand. "You can't be. That's all that ever mattered." The legal aftermath was satisfying. David Kowalski faced multiple charges, including fraud, sexual assault, and 2 murder counts. Other compound members came forward with abuse stories. Emma's testimony would be crucial, and she found strength knowing her voice could prevent him from hurting others. "I want to go back to medical school," she announced 3 months into recovery. "I know it'll be hard, but I still want to save lives, maybe more now than ever." Stanford's admissions committee was remarkably understanding. Emma's story had made national news. raising awareness about cult manipulation. She could return in fall with counseling support and reduced course load. But perhaps most healing was Emma's work with other cult survivors. She started speaking at support groups, sharing her story with desperate families, trying to reach lost loved ones. The person you're grieving is still in there, she told parents whose children had disappeared into similar groups. They're buried under programming and fear, but they're still there. Don't give up, because that unconditional parental love is sometimes the only thread connecting them to who they really are. One evening, sitting on my porch watching sunset, Emma turned to me with tears in her eyes. Dad, I need to tell you something. Even when I was saying horrible things, calling you spiritually toxic, and cutting you out somewhere deep inside, I never stopped knowing you loved me. How do you know that? Because you never gave up. Even when I gave up on myself, when everyone would have understood. If you'd walked away, you kept fighting. That necklace, Mom's necklace, I wore it every day, even when Marcus told me not to. Some part of me knew it was my connection to real love. She paused, looking at the mountains that had watched over our family for years. Marcus taught me that love was possession and control, but you showed me what real love looks like. Real love is willing to become the villain in someone's story, if that's what it takes to save them. Real love never gives up, even when the person you love has given up on themselves. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I realized that while Marcus Kane had stolen 18 months of our lives, he hadn't destroyed what truly mattered. The bond between parent and child, built on unconditional love and unwavering faith, had proven stronger than all his manipulation and lies. Emma was home, not just physically, but in every way that counted. And I had learned something profound about the power of never giving up on the people we love, no matter how lost they might seem. Sometimes love means being willing to fight for someone even when they can't fight for themselves. And sometimes that fight is the very thing that guides them home. Looking back on this journey, I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is being willing to become the villain in your child's story. When Emma called me spiritually toxic and cut me from her life, every fiber of my being wanted to respect her wishes and walk away. But God gave me the strength to see beyond her words to the truth underneath. My daughter was trapped, and she needed her father to fight for her, even when she couldn't fight for herself. These betrayal stories teach us that evil often wears the mask of enlightenment. Marcus Kane didn't present himself as a predator. He came disguised as a spiritual guide, offering healing to broken souls. But God has a way of exposing darkness, no matter how cleverly it hides. Through the dedication of law enforcement and the power of a father's unwavering love, justice prevailed. I've heard many grandpa stories from other families who've faced similar trials. Children lost to cults, addiction, or toxic relationships. What I've learned is that unconditional love never gives up. Even when your child rejects you, even when they say hurtful things, even when the world tells you to let go, sometimes holding on is exactly what saves them. God places that protective instinct in parents' hearts for a reason. The betrayal stories that hurt us most often come from those we love deepest. But these grandpa stories of redemption remind us that no one is ever truly lost. Emma came home not just because of police work or evidence, but because she always knew somewhere deep in her heart that her father's love was real and Marcus's was counterfeit. Never underestimate the power of a parent's persistent love. God works through that love to bring our children home, even from the darkest places. These grandpa stories of never giving up, they matter more than we know. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love? Share this story with others who might need hope, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of family faith and the power of never giving up.